This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast brought to you by Hoxo Media. And I'm really thrilled to bring to you today a guest who I'm very excited and proud to have on the channels. This is Ed Jervis, and he's the founder of Inclusion Crowd. Welcome to you today, Ed. How are you?
I am brilliant, and thank you so much for having me on your channels. It's
You're
a
very,
privilege.
very welcome. Now, to those who are actually watching rather than listening, isn't his background absolutely gorgeous? Love the colours in the plants. And anyone that's listening, you need to go and have a look at what Ed's got behind him. It's just something I'm really coveting his background. So, give us an overview of first of all, because at the moment, as we're recording this in February 2021, we're still a little bit covert with what Inclusion Crowd actually is, which I'm very, very proud to be a part of. So, give us an overview of what it actually is.
Inclusion Crowd is a pre-launch startup specifically in inclusion and diversity within the recruitment and hiring spaces. So how can we sort of disrupt this space? It's become a bit of a fad. It's become a bit of an echo chamber. We've overused a lot of the terms, and actually the output that we're seeing, we've never had fewer Black people on boards. We've run around and slapped our backs and self-congratulated ourselves on women on boards, but actually how many of those 30% have P&L responsibility, actually are not non-execs and all of that sort of stuff. So really it's starting to cut through some of that noise and work with recruiters and hiring managers to become a lot more sort of credible and authentic in that space, and ultimately get more representation in industry.
Brilliantly put, and you can see why I'm such a huge advocate of this, and why I'm so proud to be part of your journey and your mission to make it more than just buzzwords, and to actually create and transform how people hire and include all based on ability. So, for those who are listening who are existing leaders and those who are aspiring to be leaders, how can they actually understand what diversity and inclusion actually means in their own hiring life cycle? So hiring into their recruitment businesses, but then how they then educate their customers and their hiring clients.
And I think both of those are absolutely the critical parts of this missing piece of the jigsaw. Is you can't do for somebody else if you can't do it for yourself. And, I see a lot of sort of talking about how good we are, inclusion and diversity, how seriously we take it. We've had unconscious bias training. We go to Pride, we slap a logo on our website. We're in a top 100 list, and or whatever it may be. And actually, when you look at that and you break that down and you say, okay, well, how many Black people are on your board? How many women have P&L responsibility? What's your LGBT plus disclosure rate at senior levels within your organizations? And what we find typically is really good representation at entry level roles. We see that, we'll see a lot of representation in marketing material. We'll see a lot of representation, but actually, as you do a bit of an analysis of those organizations and start to look at that, people say to themselves, where do I see myself represented in your business? Do you talk a really good game? And I think there's a timeline on it. I think that, the markets are changing. The demographics who grew up only knowing the internet, who are driven by social justice and the environment more so than ever, will become leaders within the next 5 to 10 years, certainly senior leaders within the next 10 years. We're already seeing the market shifting. And I think, to your question about leaders and aspiring leaders, I was listening to one of the rooms on Clubhouse earlier about how to sort of nuance or niche, or how do you pick what you're doing, and really inclusion and diversity is the recruiter's biggest tool over the next sort of period, but it's about that authenticity and that credibility to it. When I was listening, I heard pitches like, yeah, we talk to our clients about inclusion and diversity, we create a great marketing pack and we talk to them about all of that sort of stuff, and then we go in and we talk to them about doing the do. The sweet spot for recruiters, the sweet spot for the industry is that becoming thought leaders, to be driving the narrative with the clients who don't know what they don't know yet, or who are also grappling with the problem that they know they need to be better than they are. And the recruiters who can really hone in on that are going to hit, as I say, that sweet spot as we see these markets changing sort of exponentially over the next sort of couple of years, 5 years anyway.
And like you say, doing so the demographic that is coming through, and making it, rather than just being a rhetoric, which I think is what it has become, and or is at the moment, that's the state of play, is actually making it real life strategy for ensuring this isn't just buzzwords that, you know, people click on there and go, but actually I want to work for that business because it's you know, whether it's Black, Asian, Jewish, you know, disabled, whatever it is, neurodiversity. There are so many elements to diversity and inclusion, and I think, I don't know whether you agree with this, but I think that what COVID has done is it's created this chasm of, you know, the before COVID, where we were in these little boxes where, you know, you sat in that and that's where you were, and now it's like the world is almost, we're at a blank piece of paper again. And that's where I think the sort of the mission of Inclusion Crowd is to create, you know, you talk about thought leaders, but actually we're all in a position to educate as recruiters, aren't we?
Right, you hit on, you know, some brilliant points there. From a strategy perspective, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, part of the issue with inclusion and diversity is it's a soft, fluffy, nice to have, HR driven add-on, and it's not viewed through the lens of a commercial growth strategy. You know, we have senior and strategic leaders who are able to confidently talk about all of the aspects of their business, whether that be revenue, profitability, market segmentation, market share, what they're going to do, how they're going to position themselves, what their proposition looks like. But they can't talk with that same confidence and clarity around the inclusion and diversity piece. And the irony is totally lost on the fact that all of it is commercial, war on talent, innovation, invention, attracting and retaining the talent that's going to drive your business, whilst at the same time delighting your customers, your shareholders, you know, the ethical consumerism, and also the pressure that you will be able to help your clients with by them working with ethical and moral organizations in their supply chain. So, you know, I'm totally on board with what you're saying from a strategic perspective. In terms of the COVID piece, I also agree. I think it's a really good reflection moment. In general, I think we all ask ourselves what we're doing with our lives during COVID. Typically, I've been eating my feelings and really bad haircut, but
mini eggs,
mini eggs, right? But the point is that there is a real opportunity here for us to ask ourselves some of the hard questions. So has your productivity or output rate stayed the same or gone up? If they have, then you need to look very clearly at your model and say, well, we can do that whilst providing people with flexibility to balance home life, caring responsibilities, wellness, mental health, and all of those sorts of things. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out some of those benefits. But I think from a DEI perspective, there's also a really good opportunity for us to reflect on, you know, men at home as well as women being at home. And there's a real balance to how well and how accessible we make it for men to be able to become primary caregivers, to be involved in that home life balance more, if we want to see women progress at senior levels, because we know there's a disconnect between men and women. But there's also a really big disconnect between women who have primary care responsibilities and women who don't. And that tax that we put on women for having those caring responsibilities. So again, I agree with you totally. There's a moment in this for us to really check ourselves and say, look, what have we learned from this COVID experience? And that for me is one of the big ones.
So for those who were sort of thinking they're doing what they should be doing in terms of D&I at the moment, what can they do to ensure that they're looking around their table, you know, whether it's a board, whether it's just, you know, an SME business, how can they ensure that they are a more inclusive workforce to start off with before they can start educating their client base? What can they actually do? What are the practical things they can actually do now to ensure that they're more inclusive?
Yeah, and it goes back to that point, don't don't say what I,
Yeah.
say, walk the walk and talk the talk and all that sort of stuff. And actually the same things that recruiters are in, are those same things that organizations can do. And I suppose it goes back to my point about how seriously do you take DEI? Because if I presented you with a sales problem, a marketing problem, a product problem, or whatever, you would turn the entire focus of your organization to solve that problem. You would look at data. You would look at how you're capturing that data. What is it telling you? Where have we pinpointed where the problems are? What solutions are we putting to those specific problems? Because we now understand them. And I suppose to the previous point about DEI is quite nuanced. So we talk about Black people, or we talk about disabled people, or we talk about sort of LGBT people, or women, or whatever. And actually, the problem is more complex and nuanced to that. There is an intersection here between all of those things. And if you as an organization can't describe confidently what that looks like in your organization, where the barriers are, where are we losing Black people, where are we losing LGBT people, what does that look like in terms of their employee life cycle with us? Are we capturing exit data? What does our progression look like? Are we selling the dream and then people are coming and they don't see themselves represented in the business, and so therefore they're immediately on the back foot? There's loads of stuff out there that's not revolutionary, but it's application of it in a sort of structured, strategic way that we make it a priority. Is there a consequence to you not doing it in your organization? Because there would be a consequence for not hitting sales. There would be a consequence for not achieving objectives. Is there a consequence in your organization? Or is wandering through this space acceptable? Has senior leaders defined what good looks like? Where would you like to be? What's the happy path? What are you aspiring to do? Because you wouldn't talk about other aspects of your business without putting out some sort of expectation over the next 12, 18, 24 months. So it's a combination of that, but it's also calling it out and saying, well, look, if you're not approaching it in that way, then I propose you're not as serious as you could be.
Well, and also I think it's been compartmentalized into the HR function. So it's almost been seen as, we've ticked that box, let's do it. But really, in simplistic terms, if you've got somebody in your business that, is a champion for D&I because of the nature of who they are, whether it is somebody that's got a disability or it's a, really strong female leader, whatever it is, they are your voice, they are your testimony. And that's the person that you can then use to showcase, this is what we've done differently. And actually, attraction of new talent is going to be the key focus for any business at all now for the next however long, for the next few years, but then retaining that talent as well. And what you don't want to do is look at, just see it as a tick box exercise and potentially lose that talent that's going to come forward. So to me, it's quite a simple strategy, but I think that's the problem. Historically, it's been a little bit like sort of L&D and marketing. It's always been compartmentalized to one person, but I think it's a much more inclusive thing that every employee now should take responsibility for. So it's cascading it down, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what is the consequence? Who is accountable? Where do you want to be? What are what are your aspirations? They are simple questions at a superficial level, but we know that to answer all of the bits that, that feed into that is complex, because you're going to have to be across your data. You're going to have to be across your business. And absolutely, you've got both of the issues with attraction, so you could be really slick and you could be great and you could sell people, to come to your party and they rock up and there's no booze, so they're not going to hang about. So that's really the issue here, is the lack of credibility when it comes to diversity and inclusion is becoming really transparent, and it's becoming really transparent, particularly as the markets are changing and the demographics are changing. We've seen all the stuff over the summer. We've seen our reaction to social justice movements. The writing's on the wall. So it's really about whether you want to be a follower in this space, because it's going to change. The government is very much putting the pressure on their supply chain to perform better in this space. We're going to see larger organizations sharing that problem with their supply chain. So you can either wait for that to sort of and catch up with it. And as the gender pay gap comes, oh, we better do that. As the ethnicity pay gap comes, all right, we better go in this. The next buzzword, all right, we're all over unconscious bias training. The next fad, all right, okay, we're all into intersectionality. So we can continue that behavior, but the recruiters, who I believe need to be the center of excellence for this, because ultimately this is about human capital and social value, and the recruitment sector is and should be the center of excellence for that. So when you mentioned about how do you drive the client behavior, that's from credibility. So that's by saying, actually,
we're the benchmark. We're the benchmark.
Correct.
We should have always been the benchmark. And I think
Correct.
there has been a significant shift, certainly since we waved goodbye to Trump over in America. The time of misogyny, and typically anyway, and I'm obviously a vocal sort of ambassador for the recruitment sector, we've tended to not be run by sort of your middle-aged misogynistic white male. It has shifted away from that, I would like to think, certainly from an entrepreneurial perspective. But what we have to do is raise up those people who are diverse and who are seeing this as something that is now of absolute prominence and as important as, it's amazing that we're focusing on mental health and well-being. And, there's obviously, I'm going to be and will be first aid certification probably by the time this goes live. So that leads me on to this license to recruit. So tell the audience about that.
Yeah, so the position for this has very much been it. There's 40,000 recruitment companies, or give or take, in the UK alone. It's a $400 billion industry worldwide. Clients are saying to themselves, is a marketing pack on D&I good enough? And actually, you're going to rock up in the pitch and sell me the dream. But the reality is that as I said before, we have never had fewer Black people on boards. We have issues with disclosure around data. We have credibility issues. There's a real difficulty for clients to cut through this noise. They're bombarded with, look at the logos, look at the work we've been working on in the last 5 years from a D&I perspective. And we're saying, but does the output and the rate of change match all that noise? And actually, is there a bit of hot air in this space? And so we really want to codify that and hone in on that and say, look, is it okay for recruiters to know the Battle of Hastings was 1066, but they've no idea when slavery ended in the UK, or the impacts of social mobility, or the social justice movement, the impacts of sort of marginalized community? We want recruiters to be able to demonstrate that to their clients, that this isn't a marketing fad. This is competence. We are industry experts. We can really get in and drive this agenda within your business. The smart recruiters, we hope, pick up on the fact that that's an amazing in with the clients, because if the clients, hiring managers, and the recruiters are learning together, that gives a much more solid basis for a longer term relationship, rather than just pitching them, what have you got coming up? What's coming up? What are you working on? Actually, we are collaborating on getting this and positioning you over the next period of time is a really strong message to clients. But our objective is ultimately, our company ambition is to make organizations more reflective of the societies in which they serve. And for us, that's about output, not rhetoric.
Yeah, well, and it couldn't have been better put than somebody like yourself, Ed. And I think if there's any way we can not create a barrier to entry, but actually raise the bar and ensure that we are truly seen as, the best advocates for how to hire and retain the best talent, that's what we should be doing. And like I say, I'm exceptionally proud to be part of this journey. And for obviously everyone listening and watching to this episode, all the links will be there for you to follow, get behind this, and hopefully become part of what will be an incredible journey to change how we see people and how we recruit and raise people up. Ed, you've been an absolute pleasure, as I knew you would be. High energy and just inspiring. You really are. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thanks again for having me.
You're welcome.